Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 4. And this week, we're going to talk about fundraising mediums. Before I dive into that, though, sorry, I feel like something's weird on my forehead. I just need to not look at myself in the camera. I just wanted to touch base on the case analysis in the final project. I know I got some emails, and I know that you guys submitted your topics, which I'll be working today and tomorrow to get those approved. But just to clarify, and in future times I teach this, I'll make sure this is more clear up front. So you could use 2 different organizations for your case study, or you could do the same. Now, the case study is an individual. The biggest difference between the 2 projects is a case study is when and this is an academic tool or just something, a business tool, in which we look at an organization and we look at something that has already occurred and we draw conclusions from that, lessons learned. Now, maybe something went wrong, so here are things to avoid, or maybe it was very, very successful, so here are things that we should continue to do. Now, for the fundraising proposal, instead of looking back, although you're going to provide background, it's really about looking ahead and presenting a plan. So it might make sense that you are using both organizations, kind of saying, here's where this organization did something great, here's where they struggled. But the fundraising plan is really going and saying, all right, here's this existing situation. And again, you needed to choose someone where there was some struggle. So it might have worked for the case study, maybe it wouldn't. But I just wanted to clarify that. And if you have any questions moving forward, let me know. Also, the case study really is written in the format of an article or a paper, and modeling it after that. Whereas your fundraising proposal, you can write it however you choose. Some choose to write it as a paper, but many people also do it more like a proposal that you would write for work briefing. Maybe there's paragraphs, but there will be bullet points, charts, graphs, key recommendations, those kind of things. So again, if you have any questions at all, please let me know. So last week, we really focused on how do we identify prospects? How do we get our prospects to give money? In some cases, we talked some in the discussion board about how do we get existing donors to move up into that kind of role of major donor. So we talked about that. And then what I'm going to talk about this week are different fundraising mediums. So again, this idea is, as an organization, a nonprofit, we're going to rely often very, very much on the donations of individuals, organizations, those kind of things. The fundraising mediums, we're really going to concentrate this week as I'm talking about individuals. And I think it's important to think as you are, particularly as you're working on your final project, is think about all the mediums that are available to you. Think about what is effective. Think about what people are currently having. Sometimes it's good to do something really unique. Sometimes we want to go with the old standby. As a parent, I would say, I feel like more of my life has been spent participating in fundraisers than I particularly want to. Right. I know my dad has gotten to the point whenever my daughters are selling something for one of their activities, he just writes a check because he said he would rather all of the money go to them if he doesn't really need it. So again, just kind of humorous, and I would say some are more successful than others. I also think this is a great example. I remember maybe about 8 years ago, for the very first time, it was the girls' soccer team in our high school sold the big buckets of laundry detergent and fabric softener, which I will say I'm a huge fan of because I'm doing laundry for 6 people. But they were the only ones doing it. So they made a ton of money. Well, it's a fairly easy fundraiser. People need the product. It sells well. There's a pretty high return. You get, as a seller, you get $10 per bucket sold. Well, now everyone's doing them. So it's become not as easy to make money, right? Because in the past, I would search out people. My own daughters actually sold them. And the only people who bought them were myself and my parents because it was something that we needed. So what are the ways? Okay. So face to face. And I'm putting this here because I would say, I think this is something we overlook. And it says, well, this can be the most uncomfortable. This method yields the greatest success. So these are, and last week we were talking about courting the major donors and asking them. But even in other situations, asking directly for donations, and I would say this is particularly in this context is when you're not selling like a product, because often if you're doing some kind of fundraiser where you're selling something, you're approaching people. But this is really just, hey, I am, raising money for Meals on Wheels. We're trying to raise this much money. Can I count on you for a donation? So why is it so successful? Well, one is you can explain a lot about what you're doing and who that is, who the organization is and how that money is, and you can rely on relationships. But honestly, the other reasons it's very successful is people have a much harder time telling you no when you are face to face. So, at holiday time, when there are the red kettle Salvation Army bells, I am one of those people that I cannot walk by without giving money because I feel so incredibly guilty, and I worry that the bell ringer is judging me for going into a store and spending money and not putting money there. I realize this is totally irrational. I also realize people donate to a variety of causes, so you don't necessarily have to donate right there. But because it's there and someone's looking me in the face, sorry, I'm getting major spam calls. Give me one sec. Okay, I apologize. I always get nervous when it's a local phone number that it's one of the schools telling me my kids are in quarantine. But luckily, it's just Apple spam. So again, getting back to it, this idea of feeling guilty because I have said no. And I feel a personal connection to someone, same thing, like, and again, this goes to sales, but if a kid has the courage to knock on my door to try to sell something, I always feel really bad saying no. And not saying that we should use guilt as a primary fundraising technique. And again, there are many positive reasons that face-to-face works, but just something to keep in mind. Another one is direct mail, and believe it or not, this continues to be a viable strategy. Your average response rates range from 0.5 to 2.5%. So these are the things you get in the mail. Like I know once you donate once to an organization, a lot of times you'll get follow-up mailers. Many times they'll include things like these little mailing labels as kind of a gift. And while this may seem really, really small, when you think of it in the context of a very broad mailing, if you can convert even 1% of 100,000 pieces of mail that you've sent out, all of a sudden you have 10,000 people who've donated, right? So again, there is always a risk with this, but it does continue to be a viable strategy. Special events, and so these are kind of the fundraising events. I would say in terms of fundraising, these can be super fun to plan and they're exciting and they can have a good return on investment. Oftentimes though, they are going to take a lot in resources in terms of upfront costs that you have to earn back in time and strategy. So these are things like most walks or runs that you see around town often will go to support. So this is a local one. And they did it virtually this year, but it's the Cupcake Run Walk for Public Education. And because a lot of teachers and the schools get involved and they do this, and everyone who runs gets a free Gigi's cupcake. So this is an example too of you're getting money from individuals, but they brought in the corporate sponsors to help offset the costs. So for example, this organization, they're not paying for the cupcakes. Gigi's is giving those as an in-kind donation. Now Gigi's gets awareness, they get recognition, they get people eating their product and hopefully getting more. But that reduces the cost of hosting the event, and then the money from the entries goes to the organization. Product sales, as we talked about, one of the most successful are Girl Scout cookies. And it here just wrapped up the selling season because you know how they're different around the country. And my girls were asking, one of them bought a box of something and apparently they're $4 now. And I was telling them back when I was a Girl Scout, 30 some years ago, they were $2 a box. So the price has doubled, right? Which, and again, I don't know enough about economics. So that one's very successful because they have a unique product and people really want them. And just as a former Girl Scout leader, at least when I was a leader, my girls were younger. So now that's been about 5, maybe 7 years. I think that our troop got 45 cents per box that we sold or something like that. So again, when you're doing product sales though, you need to consider the profit margins and return on investment. And depending on, and there's a lot of companies out there, but sometimes you want to think about, okay, if I'm going to sell this product and, Girl Scout cookies, because they're relatively inexpensive and you can sell a lot, that is a successful model. But, sometimes like if it's a very expensive product and you're only getting a small amount per, you need to think about, is this something that people would really want to buy? Is it a quality product, etc. And then, and this is really in the last 10 years become one of the primary ways, and that is online, digital. And I have 2 different things here. So this is interesting. This is Habitat for Humanity Global Village. And this is set up on a crowdfunding platform. So things like, I'm sure you're all familiar with GoFundMe. There's several different ones. And so again, these can be run through organizations, but also individuals can fundraise. And, people just click real easy and can set everything up. But most organizations of any size will have a website, and we just donate now. And what's interesting about these is people are getting nothing in return. So again, they're not getting a product, they're not attending an event, they're not running in a race, they're just simply giving money with this donate now. And one of the nice things is that you're able, often if you have a sophisticated enough platform, you can set up recurring donations, which for me is one of the best things that organizations have ever done, because if I can have just kind of everything set up and programmed and I just get a monthly reminder that I donated, I feel great. And so there's a handful of places where I'm just set up as a monthly donor. But also too, I'll admit I'm lazy. So if you send me a mailer and I have to go find a check and mail it back, it's probably not going to happen unless it's really, really important to me. But if I see this, or if oftentimes things like this, I'm sparked by, there's something in the news and there will be something that says, hey, to support this organization, you can donate money here. And again, if I can just click, it becomes really, really easy. So the big takeaway here is to remember there's lots of different options. Don't limit yourself. But with whatever option you choose, do think very strategically. If it's going to cost us $20,000 to put on a gala, is it really likely that we're going to sell this many tickets and get this much of a donation? Because if I do the gala and we end up only netting $1,000, and while that is more money, was it worth all of the time and investment that went into that? So again, if you have any questions this week, let me know and I'll see you on the discussion board.